Hey, I got a complaint about you two.
Complaint?
Someone reported you people have been lingering here too long, making other families and kids uncomfortable.
My son isn't doing anything wrong. He's just
This
playing.
really isn't a place for you people to linger. You should probably wrap it up and leave.
You don't belong here.
On a calm Saturday afternoon, a man and his young boy, barely 7 years old, were spending time together at a neighborhood public park. The child was doing what children do, running between the jungle gym and the swings, laughing freely, climbing the bars, chasing other kids around the sandbox. His father sat on a nearby bench, watching with quiet pride. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious, just a parent keeping an eye on his son. Then a police vehicle rolled up along the curb. An officer climbed out, adjusted his belt, and walked toward them with a measured, deliberate pace. His expression was serious. His body language made it clear this was not a friendly visit. He told the man he had received a call. Apparently someone in the park had reported that the boy had been there too long and was making other visitors uneasy. The father looked at him with genuine confusion. His son was not fighting anyone. He was not damaging anything. He was simply playing the way children are supposed to play. The officer kept speaking anyway. He suggested the park was not really a place for them to stay so long. He recommended they wrap things up and head somewhere else. The father asked him directly why. The officer gave a casual shrug and said there were other places their kind of people could go. He even mentioned a fast food chicken restaurant by name. Then he looked down at the little boy and told him plainly that he did not belong there. The park fell silent. Parents who had been talking amongst themselves stopped mid-sentence. People near the fountain looked over. Children slowed down on the swings. And then the phones came out one by one, because everyone standing nearby understood that what was unfolding had nothing to do with a noise complaint or loitering. This was something uglier. What the officer had not taken the time to find out, what Officer Daniel Grayson had no idea about as he stood there with his arms crossed and his tone full of authority, was that the man sitting quietly on that park bench was not just any father. He was a sitting state senator. The body camera on Grayson's uniform was already recording when he had approached the bench. The afternoon around them looked completely ordinary. Children laughing on equipment, a breeze through the trees, parents relaxing in the sun. But from the moment Grayson opened his mouth, the atmosphere shifted. He asked the man if the boy was his son. The man said yes. He asked how long they had been there. Around 20 minutes, the father replied. Grayson said he had received complaints. The father asked what kind of complaints. The officer pointed toward the playground and said the complaint was about the boy. The father glanced over. His son was going down the slide and looping back to the climbing structure, laughing alongside two other children. He told the officer his son was just playing. The officer sighed and said that was exactly what the complaints were describing. The father asked what complaints specifically. Grayson said families in the park were saying the boy had been hanging around too long. The father stared at him and pointed out that this was a playground. Grayson agreed, but said it was not really a place for his son to linger. The father leaned forward. He asked the officer to repeat what he had just said. Grayson told him again to wrap it up and move along somewhere else. The father asked why they should leave. The officer shrugged and said there were other places their kind of people could go. Then, almost under his breath, he added the comment about the chicken restaurant. The father went still. He repeated the name of the restaurant back to the officer slowly. Grayson shrugged again. The father's voice grew sharper. He asked what exactly the officer was implying, that they should go get some chicken. A couple sitting on a nearby bench immediately looked up. Grayson crossed his arms and told the man not to twist his words. The father replied that Grayson had brought it up himself. The officer said he was just making a suggestion. The father said firmly that he was making a stereotype. Before Grayson could respond, the little boy came running over from the jungle gym, breathless and smiling. He started to tell his father something about climbing. Then he noticed the officer standing there. His smile disappeared. Grayson looked down at him and asked how long he had been at the park. The The father stepped slightly forward and told the officer he did not need to question his child. Grayson ignored that and told the boy he had been bothering the other kids. The boy shook his head quickly. He said, "No, sir." The officer asked if the boy was making people uncomfortable. Again, the boy said no. He looked up at his father, confused, and asked if he had done something wrong. The father crouched beside him and told him no. He had done absolutely nothing wrong. But Grayson muttered that the complaint said otherwise. The boy's voice became smaller. He said he just wanted to play with the other kids. His eyes filled. He said he had not been bothering anybody. The father placed a hand gently on his shoulder. He told him he knew that. Grayson sighed loudly and said the park was for families. The father stood and told him they were a family. The officer shook his head and said they were not the kind of family the other people there were comfortable with. Whispers moved through the nearby crowd. Someone raised a phone and began recording. The father noticed. Grayson noticed too, but continued anyway. He said the park was not really the place for their kind. The father stared at him. He repeated the phrase back, "their kind." Grayson said he had heard him correctly. The boy gripped his father's hand hard. He said quietly that he did not want to leave. His voice cracked. He said he just wanted to play. The father looked down at his son, then back at the officer. He told Grayson that he was standing there telling a 7-year-old child that he could not play in a public park. Grayson said that was exactly what he was telling them. The silence that had fallen over the playground stretched longer now. Parents who had been sitting quietly moments before were now whispering to one another. A few children had stopped moving entirely. They could sense the weight in the air even without understanding it. The little boy still had his hand wrapped tightly around his father's fingers. His eyes were red. He asked in a small voice if they were in trouble. The father shook his head gently and told him no, that he had done nothing wrong. Grayson stepped closer. His voice got harder. He said again that it was time for them to go. The father did not move. He said it was a public park and that his son had every right to be there. Grayson scoffed and said the other families did not see it that way. The father looked around at the crowd that had gathered. A woman near the sandbox said quietly that the boy was just a child. Grayson ignored her and pointed toward the park entrance, telling them they were done. The boy's voice trembled. He said he had just gotten there. He pointed weakly toward the swings and said he had wanted to try the bigger one. Tears were forming. He said he had not even gotten a turn. The father's expression tightened. He reminded the officer his son was 7 years old. Grayson shrugged and suggested they take him somewhere more appropriate. The father repeated the word, appropriate. The officer nodded slowly and said yes, somewhere their people usually spent their time. Several people nearby gasped. A woman filming whispered that she could not believe what she was hearing. The father stepped forward and said plainly that Grayson was telling his son he did not belong there. Grayson crossed his arms. He said that when someone like the boy was reported to be lingering around other people's children, he took that seriously. He paused deliberately before finishing the sentence. The father's voice went colder. He repeated the phrase, someone like him. Grayson looked down at the boy and said he had heard him. The boy wiped his eyes and looked around at everything, the slide, the swings, the monkey bars, the other kids still running around. His voice broke completely. He asked his father why the man wanted them to leave. The father crouched down again. He said again that nothing wrong had been done. The boy said but the officer had told him he did not belong. The words sat there between them heavy. The boy began to cry, quietly at first, then more openly. He said he just wanted to play. The father wrapped an arm around him. He said it was going to be okay. Grayson stepped forward again, visibly irritated. He said he was not going to stand there arguing. His hand moved to his belt. He told them both to leave. The father stood back up. He asked if the officer was ordering them out of a public park. Grayson said he was. The father asked under what law. Grayson smirked and told him not to get smart. The father said he had asked a question. Grayson's voice turned hostile. He said the father was creating a disturbance. The father said he had created nothing, that Grayson was the one who had walked over and started this. Parents nearby nodded quietly. One man spoke up and agreed the child had not been bothering anyone. Grayson turned and told the crowd to mind their business. Someone else raised their phone higher and said that this had become everyone's business now. Grayson's jaw tightened. He turned back to the father and accused him of making people uncomfortable. The father gestured toward his crying son and said his child was in tears because an officer had told him he did not belong there. Grayson said that was what happened when people like them pushed into places they should not be. The father's eyes narrowed. He said Grayson had used that phrase again, people like them. Grayson moved closer and said it was because it kept being true. The boy tugged at his father's sleeve and begged to just leave. He said his voice was shaking and that he did not want the officer to keep yelling. The father looked down at him. Something moved across his face, the particular pain of a parent who cannot protect his child from an adult's ugliness in a place that was supposed to feel safe. Grayson pointed toward the exit and said even the kid understood it was time to go. The father slowly straightened. He said no. Grayson blinked. The father repeated himself. They were not leaving. Grayson's face darkened immediately. He said that had not been a suggestion. The father said he was aware of that. The officer said it was an order. The father said calmly that he was refusing it. The tension spiked. More phones went up. A woman near the fountain whispered that this was going to go everywhere. Grayson raised his voice and said the father was refusing a lawful order. The father replied that he was refusing an unlawful one. Grayson stepped closer and asked if the man thought he was smarter than him. The father said no, he just knew his rights. Grayson laughed without humor. He said people like them always said that. The father shook his head and said no, people like Grayson always assumed they did not have any. The officer reached for his radio and called in that he had a non-compliant individual at Riverside Park refusing to leave. The father watched him without moving. The boy held his arm tighter and asked if they were going to take his father away. The father crouched slightly and told him no, but that the officer was upset. The boy said he knew. Grayson finished his call and looked back at them. He said they were both about to learn something today. The father asked what that was. Grayson leaned slightly forward and said that when an officer gave an order to leave, you left. The father stood to his full height. The park went quiet in a way it had not been all afternoon. When he spoke, his voice was completely steady, unhurried, and clear enough for every phone recording to pick up every single word. He told the officer that no, it was Grayson who was about to learn something. The officer frowned and asked what. The father looked slowly around at the cameras, the watching parents, his son still drying his face with the back of his hand. Then he looked directly at Grayson and said it plainly. He had chosen the wrong father to humiliate today.